worship, can we stand to our feet all across the room? Jesus, we worship you, God. Come on, let's put our hands together all across the room. Let's go. To battle, no doubt in my mind that my God is with me. Victory is mine. I'll dance in the shadow of my enemy. 'Cause God is my champion. He fights for me. Oh, God is my champion. He fights for me. We say, bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay. 'Cause you're stronger than 10,000. Stronger than 10,000. We say, oh, 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 oh. No weapon against me will prosper or stand. 'Cause I got a promise from the Son of Man. I'll throw off my armor and raise up my hands. 'Cause I know my God and I know who I am. Oh, I know my God, I know who. We say, bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay. 'Cause you're stronger than 10,000. Oh, you're stronger than 10,000. Bigger the battle, say, bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay. 'Cause you're stronger than 10,000. Oh, you're stronger than 10,000. Oh, we say, oh, 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 come on, let's declare this. Say, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Tell every giant, get out my way. I'm not afraid. No, I'm not afraid. Tell every giant, get out my way. Say, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Tell every giant, get out my way. I'm not afraid. No, I'm not afraid. Tell every giant, get out my way. Say, bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay. 'Cause you're stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10,000. Bigger the battle, say, bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay. 'Cause you're stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10. Sing, you're stronger than 10. Stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10,000. Oh, come on, let's take a shot. Come on, all across the room, if you believe that this morning, with our eyes closed and hands lifted, just begin to speak to Jesus in this moment. Say, Jesus, we love you. We thank you for all that you've done for us. God, we just put our trust and our faith in you right now in this moment. It's all we need, Jesus. So where would we be without you, Jesus? And old things have passed away. Your love has stayed
We put our hands together and give Jesus praise. Can we do that? Just praise his name. You can go ahead and be seated. But just this opportunity, that's what worship is really all about, an opportunity for us to love God back, to love Jesus with all of our heart, our mind, our soul, and our strength. I mentioned in the 9:30 service that oftentimes, unfortunately, outside of the church, when people don't understand a relationship with God, they think that a relationship with God is all about rules and regulations, and I've got to dot this I and cross this T and jump over that hoop in order to please God and love God. And the reality is, a relationship with God is just that. It's not rules, not regulations. It's about a relationship. And Jesus said, when you and I love him the way we ought to love him, he said, you'll obey my commandments. Not anything that you're going to have to force yourself to do. It's not because it's always easy, but we just want to please God, and we want to love God, and we want to walk away from sin, and we want to just be everything that Jesus intended us to be because we love him. So thank you for entering in to that time of worship. And it's so good to have you here today. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. It's great to have our church family back. It's great to have our new friends that are with us. And let me just say that if you're brand new to our church, we want you to feel right at home. We want you to feel loved and valued. We want you to feel wanted because that's how we feel about you. And by the way, if you're newer to our church, right after the service, if you'll just stop by that big blue tent out there, I would love to be able to meet you personally right after the service. So stop by, say hi on your way afterwards. We would appreciate that so very, very much. Hey, a couple of things that I wanted to mention to you. By the way, we're going to take communion at the end of the service. And so we'll pass those out later. There's so much that we were already giving out. I didn't want you to feel like, hey, it's trick or treat, and every time I stop, somebody gives me something. But there's some things that you receive coming into the door that are really, really important. Grow Track is one of them. Grow Track, a Super Saturday. We're having what's called a Super Saturday right here. I think we're going to be right here in this particular auditorium, right here. For that, I know that we're going to be right here at Cobb, and it starts at 9 o'clock, and it starts with Chick-fil-A, to the glory of God. And so we'll have that waiting for you. We'll do 4 sessions. Let me just say, this is the easiest way to do Grow Track. And actually, all in one brief morning. You see, the concluding time, we start at 9, we conclude at noon. We've got childcare available. All of that is taken care of. And it's the easiest way to do Grow Track. And Grow Track is the logical next step for virtually any question you may have about our church. When somebody says, hey, I'd like to become a member of the church, well, how do I do that? You go through Grow Track. And some of you are saying, but do I really need to become a member of the church? And I hope that you will. We consider you a part of the church family, whether you're like technically a member or not. But I often use this illustration. How many of you know that I like college football? How many of you know that already? Wave your hand. I look at it this way. To become a member would be like saying, hey, I not only want to play the game, I want to be on a team. We'd sort of scoff at somebody that said, hey, I want to play college football. I just don't want to be on any particular team. And Grow Track is a way, it's the membership pathway. You learn about yourself in there. It challenges you, some habits that will help you to grow spiritually. How do you become more involved in the life of the church? I'll be teaching one of the sessions, 4 sessions. We hit them really quickly. So here's what I want you to do. And I've rarely do it, but I've done it twice recently. Once when I said, hey, submit your questions, and Dr. Hackett and I responded to those last week. We got a lot of great feedback, by the way, on that. We'll probably come back and do it in July. But here's another opportunity, and I hope you'll go ahead and take this out right now and use that little QR code right there. And if you would just take a moment, scan that QR code, and you can sign up. I asked the team to make it like really, really quick and easy for you to be able. I didn't want it to be cumbersome. I didn't want it to be drug out. And so you could do it like really, really quick. So I'd like to ask you to go ahead and take out your phone now, scan it, go ahead and sign up for Super Saturday. And if you're like, Jeff, man, I'd rather sign up some other way than doing it that way. Well, then there's some cards out of the table, and just put your name, information, check South Campus, and we'll sign you up. We'll be ready for you with childcare. You know, you can let us know about that, and we'll definitely be ready for you with Jesus Chicken. So that's going to be a great, great day, and I look forward to you being there. The other thing you received is an invite card. We know that some people will come at Easter when they won't come any other time of the year. It's just the thing culturally that people often do, even if they're not a Christian, and this is what we know. We know you're going to have family members and friends and coworkers that are going to be here that ordinarily are not in church, and so we strategically plan in that way because this is what we're believing. In those 3 services 2 weeks from now, we believe there's going to be many, many, many people that are going to either receive Christ for the very first time or people that have been strayed from God that are going to make a recommitment to Jesus. So you get them here. We're planning in that regard and expecting and praying. So there's more of these cards out there. You can get them. Make it easy on people when you invite them. Just say, hey, I'll meet you out in the lobby so you can sit with me. And if you want to just say, hey, you don't even have to worry about breakfast. I've provided you with Mr. Donut Donuts and some great whatever you need to do to get them here. And it's going to be a great, great time. So thank you for that. Thank you for being faithful with what God's entrusted to you and honoring God with the full tithe. And I want to just say that pleases the heart of God when you and I say, Lord, I've got income because you've given me the opportunity to work, or you give me the opportunity to think, whatever it is. And God, you bless me with income. And then we remember God right off the top. Hey, I want to give you a quick update, and I need to move on. And that is, you've been responding to Ukraine and helping a lot of people. And I mentioned to you that there are 2 organizations that we have partnered with. I don't know that I've ever named the organizations. One of them is AGWM, which stands for Assemblies of God World Mission. And that's the personnel. That's the missionary boots on the ground that are ministering to people. Initially, it was right in Ukraine. Now it's been pulled back into a lot of these refugee camps where now 2 million plus people are. And so through AGWM and then also through Convoy of Hope, and that's the tangible, that's the water, that's the food, that's the sleeping bags, that's the baby formula. And because of your generosity, I'm happy to tell you that we have been able to send to those organizations $40,000, $20,000 each, and to supply the people, to minister, and the resources to put in the hands of the Ukrainians who have fled because of all the devastation there. So I want to say thank you. It's still not too late to give, and however you choose to give, text to give online, you give at the end of the service. I just want to say thank you for all that you do. Now, would you turn your attention to the screen?
Good morning and welcome to Victory on this first Sunday in April. If you're new, you can stay updated and discover all that's available by filling out our Connect card online at victorylakeland.org/Connect card. Or you can stop by the Guest Central tent as you leave so we can meet you and give you a small gift as a way of saying thank you for being here today. One of the most important and exciting days of the year is just 2 weeks away. Sunday, April 17th is Easter Sunday, and we have a great morning planned for all ages. Your kids will learn the story of Easter through an immersive and interactive teaching experience, and you will be encouraged with a message designed to show how Jesus' resurrection changes everything. Whether your friends and family have never been to church, haven't come in a long time, or are already connected, Easter 2022 will be a fantastic day of celebrating Jesus and the new life that comes because of the resurrection. Take time this week to intentionally invite someone you know who needs the hope and freedom that can only come through knowing Jesus. To make space for everyone, we'll have services at 8:45, 10, and 11:15 a.m. on Easter Sunday, so invite everyone you know to join you. The week after Easter, on Sunday morning, April 24th, we'll celebrate with those who have decided to follow Jesus by being baptized in water. If you'd like to be baptized, reserve your spot by signing up in the foyer as you leave today or online at victorylakeland.org/baptism. Victory offers a wide range of classes and support groups covering practical life issues and spiritual growth. Classes meet throughout the week at our North Lakeland campus, providing opportunities to build community, pray, serve, and fellowship. If you have not yet connected with a class, look through the Victory Life brochure you received today to find the right fit for you and your family. And 2 other quick things. Make plans now to be a part of this year's annual business meeting happening Monday, April 18th at 6:30 p.m. Everyone is invited, but we ask for members to make a special effort to attend, as we'll be looking over the past year, learning about what God has in store for next year, as well as prayerfully voting for new board members. To make it possible for everyone to attend, we are offering childcare for newborns through 5th grade. Don't miss this opportunity to be a part of the life-changing ministry happening right here at Victory. And finally, a delicious way to make a difference in the lives of students this spring, the Victory Christian Academy baseball team invites you to participate in this year's barbecue fundraiser. The team is selling slow-cooked 10 to 12-pound pork shoulders for just $35 to raise money for equipment and uniforms. You can place your order before or after Sunday and Wednesday services, and your fully cooked barbecue will be ready for pickup on Saturday, April 23rd at 3 p.m. Thank you again for being a part of today's service, and remember to invite someone to be in church with you next week.
The world had been waiting for a redeemer, a hero, a king, Jesus. Born a miracle to live a life of miracles, to rescue the oppressed and heal the sick, to end oppression and conquer the enemies of darkness. Until one terrible, confusing, and chaotic Friday. While the sun was still sleeping, Jesus was arrested and accused. As the day advanced, the one who had healed 1,000 wounds was battered, torn, and left to die on the cross. This changes everything.
And today we're going to talk about the Friday of Easter. This morning I'm starting a message series that's going to lead us up to Easter Sunday. A lot of times we start a series on Easter the week after Easter, but we're doing a little bit different in that I'm starting today by talking to you about Friday, and then next week about Saturday. And Saturday is really, and we'll get into this next week. I'm not going to spend any time here, but it's a day of silence, and the silence breeds confusion. Because here he is, Jesus, who claimed to be the Son of God and has been crucified. It is the day when he's in his tomb. Easter Sunday, Friday's already happened. The crucifixion has happened. Easter Sunday is the day of celebration and resurrection, but Saturday is a day of silence and a day of confusion. And I'm going to talk to you about that next week. And then when we come together 2 weeks from now in 3 one-hour services, we're going to see God do amazing things. But today, I want to talk to you about Friday. And by the way, let me just take a moment to talk to our online friends who live in town. I know that there are a lot of people that watch that do not live in the greater Lakeland area, but those of you that are, and if you were a part of our church prior to COVID and you need to slip away because of health reasons, then I want to just say to you, we're wanting you, we're really wanting you to re-engage with us on Easter. Some of you might have some extenuating medical situations going on that would not be recommended, but we know that is a small percentage of people. The rest of you, we're ready for you to come back on Easter. So today what I want to do is I want to tell a story, and I'm going to be checking in with you from time to time with a story to make sure that you're following along. I'm not going to detail this, but this is not going to be, the way I'm going to share it is not going to be like linear, like down the list. It's going to be a story. And it's a story that leads us up to the crucifixion of Jesus. And the scene that I want you to initially get in mind, and again, I'll check in with you to make sure you're still with me, have you wave at me or do something. So this is not nap time. It's not grocery list time. It's not time to be thinking about work or school tomorrow. It's a time to be dialed in, because I want you to fundamentally understand what really the crucifixion, the suffering of Jesus was all about. And the scene that I want to take you to initially is a scene just outside of the gates of Jerusalem. And if you were standing there, you would notice with me in this particular scene, on this darkest day in history, you would see 3 crosses. But the center one at this point, where I pick up this story to share with you today, the center one is empty. The center cross is empty. The victim has already been taken down from the cross, and posted at the top of this cross is a sign which reads, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. I did a lot of study. In fact, in the 9:30 service, I fought an urge that I will once again fight in this service, and that is with all the study and everything that went into today. There's going to be so many things that are going to be like, ooh, don't have time, leave that out, maybe share it later, and I want to say this, and I hadn't thought about saying that, but I'll add it to the story. So you just know that internal battle is going to be going on with me because I want to keep us on track time-wise. But in part of the studying that I was doing in regards to this, I ran across this statement by a great writer who, in talking about Friday, said the holiest man in history died, and he describes it, he says it this way, died covered in his own blood and your sin. Our salvation, this writer says, took place on a hill where the smell alone would have driven us back into the city. And then he makes this great statement. I like the way he uses his words. He said, we would have been most horrified by the moment God was most glorified. I want you to think about that. We would have been most horrified by the moment when God was actually most glorified. And we need to talk about this in this story. And we have to ask the question, really, why did Jesus have to die? In so many respects, it doesn't even make sense why Jesus would have to die. I mean, he's an innocent man. He's loving. He's compassionate. He's sinless, the only sinless man that ever lived. And everywhere he went, in fact, the gospel said that Jesus went about. I want you to listen to the language. It said that Jesus went about doing good. Everywhere he went, he did good. And it says, follow up to that, he went about doing good and healing all manner of disease. And in fact, in my devotions this past week, I was reading about Jesus and miracles and that he would constantly be flocked with these crowds. And everybody, once they had found out it was Jesus, they'd like bring everybody. In fact, when I was reading in my devotion, it said the whole city practically emptied out and people just brought to Jesus everybody that had an ailment, everybody that had a sickness, everybody that had any kind of abnormality, and Jesus would just heal and he would touch, and he taught life-changing principles, and he demonstrated love and compassion in a way that it had never been demonstrated before. So how was it that Jesus would be executed as an enemy of the state? It doesn't really make sense until you start digging into the story. And maybe you've never really thought a whole lot about what I'm going to share with you. I believe what you're going to hear for the next few moments, you're going to learn more about that Friday and what's leading up to that Friday than perhaps you've ever known before. And I hope that it will motivate you and compel you to get into the Gospels and reread the story. But maybe you've never thought that there was actually a whole lot that had already taken place behind the scenes that brings us to this place. And I don't have a lot of time to deal with this, and I'm going to hit some high points as I tell this story of Friday, but there were many challenges that existed in Rome, and Rome certainly comes into play as it relates to the death of Jesus. See, the attitude of Rome was, I want you to track with me on this, the attitude of Rome was that Jesus had to be killed. He had to be, because he was a threat to their nation, and any menace of Rome had to be eliminated. You see, in Jesus' day, what the Israelites, just jumping over, from Rome really to the Israelites, and again, I'll be chasing these thoughts like, Jeff, you don't have time to share all of that, all that you've studied, but I do want to pause here in telling you this story of Friday to mention to you that Rome and the Israelites were not in agreement. They were not congruent. They were not cooperative. They didn't get along with each other. In fact, they despised and loathed one another. In Jesus' day, what the Israelites genuinely wanted was a Messiah. That's what they longed for. They longed for a Messiah. And this idea of Messiah is really important if you're going to understand Jesus. See, the Israelites, there's this Roman occupation, and perhaps that would be really important for you to know. There's this Roman occupation of the holy city. And much to the chagrin of the Jews, of the Israelites. And again, the Romans hated the Israelites for the most part. The Israelites hated the Romans. And so here are the Israelites, and they want and they need a leader. They need a Messiah. They need somebody who will lead them in a revolt against Rome. Someone who would launch the charge to overthrow Rome and provide them with something that they desperately long for in their lives, and that is a freedom from their oppression. But Rome would have none of it. And into this context, Jesus is born and had his ministry. And now on a Friday, he's headed to the cross. Now, I think it would be important for you to know, and maybe when you read into Acts chapter 5 and you come to discover these names, that you'll understand in the future the background. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Prior to Jesus' growing popularity, there were many what I would call wannabe messiahs. People who claimed to be the Messiah. People that other people thought that they might actually be the Messiah, but were really not the Messiah at all. And I'll give you a couple of examples. There seems to be, at least from my study, there seems to be at least 18 wannabe messiahs, but for our time's sake, I'll only mention two. The first one is a guy by the name of Theudas. Theudas is actually mentioned in Acts chapter 5, and I want you to look at verse 36 where he's mentioned, and then I'll talk about him for just a moment. This is what it was said of Theudas. You remember that Theudas appeared some time ago, this is Acts 5, claiming to be somebody great. He is claiming to be the Messiah. And about 400 men joined in with him. But he was killed, and I'll tell you how he was killed. The verse doesn't tell us, but historians do. But he was killed, all of his followers were scattered, and his movement died out. Theudas is a wannabe Messiah. Now, there's a historian by the name of Josephus who tells us a little bit about Theudas, how that he was actually a guy that called himself a Messiah, the Messiah, and there were many who were buying into his story. Now, Theudas actually claimed, ironically, he claimed that he could part the Jordan River. That's what Theudas claimed, that he could part the Jordan River. He said that he could do it. How many of you know that he could not do it? He couldn't, and he never attempted because maybe deep down he knew that he couldn't, but he claimed that he could. He also claimed that he could actually destroy, that he could cause the walls of Jerusalem to collapse, to fall. How many of you know that Theudas could not cause the walls around Jerusalem to collapse and fall? But that is what he claimed. He is a wannabe Messiah. So what happens is, as Theudas begins to have all of these enthusiastic followers who are tracking with him, and he leads them. This is what I want you to catch now in this story that I'm telling you about Friday. Theudas actually leads them in a rebellion against Rome. But then Theudas is captured shortly thereafter. Listen to this now. It says in verse 36 that he is killed. I'll tell you how he was killed. He was actually, historians tell us that he was actually decapitated, Theudas was, in front of a large crowd right there in Jerusalem, because here was the idea, the visual of that was very effective, because Rome wanted everybody to know that this is what happens when you mess with Rome. You may get your head taken off. That's Theudas. Let me mention one more. Another wannabe Messiah was a guy by the name of Judas the Galilean. He too is mentioned in Acts chapter 5. And he founded a group called, and you've heard of this group, many of you, the Zealots. And boy, there's so many things I want to chase about that, but I don't have time to, and who was connected with the Zealots originally. But Judas the Galilean founded and led this group called the Zealots, and he got them all fired up around this idea, and this is going to come into play later, and I want you to keep this in mind. Judas the Galilean got them all fired up, the Zealots, about this idea that Israel should never pay taxes to Rome. Now keep in mind, the Israelites hate the Romans. They hate Pilate. I'm going to mention him in just a moment. They hate Caesar for that matter, and I'll mention that in just a moment. They have occupied the holy city, and the Israelites despise the Romans. And it was this idea that Judas the Galilean is saying, hey, these people have occupied the holy city. We hate them. We should never pay taxes to them. The Zealots are a large group, and Judas the Galilean convinces them, listen to this now, to take up arms against the Romans. But he too, just like Theudas, is apprehended. And along with about 2,000 of his followers are crucified. I've shared with you in times past that Jesus was not the first or the last person to be crucified. Prior to Jesus' crucifixion, Judas the Galilean, along with, as I mentioned to you, about 2,000 of his followers are actually crucified. Can I give you a side note here? The Romans actually would leave crosses standing long after the person crucified was dead and taken down. The Romans left these crosses standing in Galilee to send a strong message to anybody who may eventually get the bright idea, like Judas the Galilean, that taxes should not be paid to Rome. Now, on a side note, as a young boy growing up in the region of Galilee, Jesus would have seen the crosses, seen them standing across the horizon, and early on realized what happens to those who revolt against Rome. How many of you are with me? I told you I would check in. Are you with me in this story? This is what is playing out. There's a writer, a scholar actually, by the name of Alistair. I think his first name is Alistair. I know his last name is McGrath. And he has written about this time period, and this is what he says, and I'll just read this paragraph to you. He says, during the period of Jesus' ministry, Palestine was occupied and administrated by Rome. There was fierce nationalist feeling at the time, fueled by intense resentment at the presence of a foreign occupying power, which was Rome, again in the Holy City. And this appears to have given a new force to the traditional expectation of the coming of the Messiah. For many, the Messiah, listen to this now, this got to come into play. For many, the Messiah would be the deliverer who would expel the Romans from Israel and would restore the royal line of King David. It is clear, McGrath writes, that Jesus refused to see himself as Messiah in this sense of the term. At no point in Jesus' ministry do we find any violence against Rome suggested or condoned, nor even an explicit attack on the Roman administration. I want you to think about that. So in all, there are about 18, at least that we know of, about 18 wannabe messiahs. Now, there are all kinds of people and all kinds of groups in and around Jerusalem. As I mentioned to you, they hate the Romans, and they not only want to see the Romans driven out of the holy city, they would love it if the Romans would be absolutely annihilated. And so it begs this question among the Israelites, but when? When will the Messiah appear? And when will he lead us in the revolt against the Romans? Obviously, it wasn't Judas. Obviously, it wasn't Judas the Galilean, nor others that can be mentioned. But when will the Messiah come? Now, you cannot talk about Friday and leave Pilate out of the story. How many of you have ever heard of Pilate? How many of you know he didn't fly airplanes? It's not P-I-L-O-T, P-I-L-A-T. You cannot share the story. Are you still with me? Wave at me. Wave at me. Are you with me in this story? You can't share the story about Friday and leave Pilate out of the story. This is the man, this is the governor who actually seemingly holds, and I emphasize the word seemingly, holds the fate of Jesus' life in his own hands. And, when I bring up Pilate, it makes me want to talk about Tiberius, and I don't have time to get into that. And I'll mention Caesar, who had jurisdiction over Pilate, and that's a whole other story. And I'll mention Caesar, but I don't have time to get into that whole story. But all I will tell you concerning Pilate, for the most part, is he is not a friend. And you need to fundamentally understand this. He is not a friend of the Jews. He hates the Jews. He hates them in every way. And they hate him. He's not a friend. In fact, Josephus, mentioned in this historian again, he actually writes of a time when Pilate immediately offended the Jews, the Israelites, by bringing what they thought were outrageous, what they called outrageous Roman standards into the holy city. Now, I could give you a lot of examples of that, but let me just give you one since I'm telling you a story. On one occasion that just really sent the Israelites into orbit was this time when Pilate took these golden shields and plastered on these golden shields were the names and the images of Roman deities. And you know what he did with them? He had them moved into the sacred temple. And oh man, that was like a major, major no-no. So the Israelites, again, you with me? I'm checking in with you. You with me? The Romans have invaded the holy city, and then you've got Pilate, and he is just, everything that he's doing is offensive to the Israelites. In fact, another ancient writer, not Josephus, but another one said concerning Pilate that his rule was, and I quote, marked by bribery, insults, robberies, supreme cruelty, executions without a trial, and that Pilate actually had a furious, vindictive temper. Pilate is always irritated with the Jews, and the Jews, as I've mentioned to you a couple of times, loathe Pilate. And the reason that I wanted to establish that is because what happens next is quite interesting to me. And once you see it, I think you will agree. Here's what happens. The Jewish chief priest, after having him arrested by the temple guard, bring Jesus. I want you to think about this now. Who do they bring Jesus to? They initially bring him to Pilate. Furthermore, when they bring him before Pilate, and again, they've never collaborated. They hate each other. But isn't that ironic that when they arrest Jesus, and we know about that because we read about it, how it plays out with the betrayal. You saw it even in the little bumper video, how that Judas betrays Jesus with a kiss, and he's arrested there. But I want you to notice their accusation when the Israelites, when these Jewish chief priests and rulers of the law bring Jesus before Pilate. I want you to look at this up here on the screen. They begin to state their case. It's them, the chief priests, talking to Pilate. They said, this man has been leading our people astray by telling them not to pay taxes to the Roman government. How many of you know that that is not true? That is absolutely not true. Jesus never, that was Judas the Galilean and others like him, but Jesus never said that. In fact, I need to throw this story in. I was going to leave it out, but I need to take the time to throw it. Do you remember that time when Simon Peter was asking Jesus about questions? And you say, the IRS was around back then. It wasn't the IRS, but they still had to pay taxes to Caesar. In fact, do you remember, hang on to that thought, do you remember that time when somebody came to Jesus and they're trying to catch him in a trap and they said, who do we give this to? And, a coin. And Jesus said, all right, whose inscription is on that coin? And they said, Caesar. And then Jesus makes this brilliant statement. He said, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar and to God the things that are God. How many of you know he was not telling them not to pay taxes? And this other occasion that I bring you back to. Do you remember when Simon Peter was having a discussion with Jesus about taxes? And Jesus said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go fishing, and your fishing expedition is going to take care of your tax implication as well as mine. And he's like, how? And he said, just throw out. And do you remember this story? This is a real story. And Simon Peter, do you remember this? Wave at me if you do. And he brings in a fish. And what does he do? He opens the mouth of the fish, and in there is a coin. And he says, yep, just like you said. How many of you like to fish? How many of you have ever fished and drawn out a coin that was sufficient enough to pay your taxes? Yeah, me neither. And so he said, you take the coin and you go pay the tax obligation for you and for me. So Jesus, what they're saying, their accusation of Jesus is entirely dishonest. He never told them not to pay taxes. And they said, furthermore, he claims he is the Messiah, a king. And a lot of people said that about Jesus. But Jesus didn't walk around saying, I'm the Messiah, I'm the Messiah, I'm the Messiah, I'm the Messiah. He didn't do that. Now, what's the implication of their accusation? They are saying, in essence, the chief priests are saying, which is like a religious body, they are the Jewish religious body who hates Jesus. In fact, Pilate later recognizes, I wasn't going to share this verse, but I guess by sharing it now, I am sharing the verse. Do you remember it says at one point in time that Pilate realizes that the Jews are jealous against Jesus? You remember that? Do you remember also another time when it says that Pilate's wife had a dream before all this plays out? And it says, you be careful how you deal with Jesus. I had a dream last night that is so disturbing to me. So, what they're saying before Pilate is this. You've got to understand this. This is the only way that they can make it work. Jesus is an enemy of Rome. He's an enemy. Caesar, and when they said Caesar, Pilate would have to perk up. Caesar would not tolerate him. Therefore, you shouldn't. You need to do something about it. All right? How many of you I'm checking in. How many of you are still with me on this story? It's a fascinating story. I could talk about Jesus all day, but I only have 13 minutes and 14 seconds, 13, 12. All right, so I need to keep moving on. So Pilate actually, he doesn't agree with him. He actually resists the chief priest, not because he was sympathetic toward Jesus. He simply felt contempt for them. Instead, and this, you're going to be able to connect the dots now. Instead, he offers to them an alternative. You got to keep in mind, it is Passover time. And Passover goes all the way back to that time when God would lead his people, the Israelites, out of Egyptian captivity. They would have an exit. They would have an exodus. And just prior to the exit or the exodus, there would be the Passover. And now, here we are, years and years and years later, and the Passover is still being acknowledged by the Jews. In fact, in many among Jews today, the Passover is still acknowledged. And so Pilate says, all right, here. He resists them, and he throws out an alternative. He said, you remember that it's Passover time, and the normal practice of Passover time is that I release to you a prisoner. So here's my plan. I'm going to release to you, because he realizes this whole thing is about jealousy and all of that. I don't think Pilate is necessarily, as I mentioned, sympathetic with Jesus, but he so hates the Jews. He says, it's time, it's Passover time. I'm going to release a prisoner, and guess the prisoner who I am going to release? I'm going to release to you Jesus, because they brought Jesus to Pilate as a prisoner. As a guilty man. He doesn't pay taxes. He tells people not to pay taxes. He claims to be a king. And you know how Caesar is going to feel about anybody who claims to be a king. And so all this is playing out. And they're saying, this, and Pilate's like, no, I'm releasing. And then there's this outcry. Do you remember? All right, do you remember? It's not a trick question. Do you remember how they, Pilate resists them, and then they resist Pilate, and they said, no, we don't want Jesus to be released. We want instead for who to be released? Barabbas. Barabbas. But why Barabbas? I'll tell you why. You know why the Jewish chief priests want Barabbas to be released? Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever heard this? Are you still with me in this story? I'm just checking in. Wave at me if you are. You know why they want him released? Because he's a murderer. Jesus is not a murderer, but Barabbas is, and this is what they know. They know when they ask for the release of Barabbas that he's killed Romans in the past, and just as soon as he is freed up, he so hates Romans just like they do, he's probably going to kill some more. How can, in their minds, Jesus be the Messiah when he will not even lift a finger against Rome? Now, the chief priest, they've got to act quickly because this plan's going to get away from them if they're not careful. But they're holding on, the chief priests are holding on to a final trump card, and I don't mean that politically. They're holding on to a trump. I couldn't resist, all right? Some things I can't help it. You pray for me. I ask people to pray for me. This stuff just comes out. I apologize. But they're holding the card. But it's Friday, and it's time to play it. So I want you to check out these two verses. These really, I want you to see what they do. Then Pilate tried to release him, Jesus, but the Jewish leaders shouted, if you release this man, you release Jesus instead of Barabbas, guess what? You're no friend of Caesar. Anyone who declares himself a king, which Jesus had not, but they said that he had, anybody who declares himself a king is a rebel against Caesar. Now look at verse 15. Look at it. Away with him, they yelled. Away with him. Crucify him. What? Crucify your king? Pilate asked. Hey, let's stop right there. Can I bring you back to what I said? You remember at the very outset, I said, let me take you to a scene outside the city gates of Jerusalem. And there are 3 crosses, and the center one is empty because its victim has been taken down. And on the top of that cross is this statement, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And they hated. When that happened, they hated. And they said, he's not our king. And Pilate essentially said, I put up there what I put up there. Keep your mouth shut. I'm in charge. Crucify your king, Pilate asked. We have no king. Look at that. Do you see the irony of this? They hate the Romans. They hate the Romans. We have no king but Caesar. And this is the leading priest shouted back. Now, what did these chief priests, and I need to hurry, but what did these chief priests know concerning Jesus? They knew that he was not a military threat. They knew that he did not carry within him the hate that they had for the Romans. And I think, and I want you to really, really listen to this, I think with all of my heart that they fully realized that Jesus' mission was not to overthrow Rome and then establish some earthly kingdom. In fact, Jesus let it be known loud and clear, listen, that his kingdom was not of this world. Didn't he? My kingdom is not of this world. And in a way that Jesus lived in love, it was becoming increasingly apparent that a new kingdom was, in fact, breaking into this world. Not the kingdom that the Israelites and the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the Sanhedrin were all about, but a new kingdom was breaking into this world, the kingdom of God. And it would be one not of hate and violence, but one of love and grace. It would be one where not of murderous rage, but of forgiveness and salvation for all who would receive it. Some time ago, I read a book by Andy Stanley, and I brought along just one paragraph from that book because I think it's befitting of this moment. He writes in this book, he said, it wasn't just Jesus' new message that made him irresistible. It was Jesus himself. People, I like this statement. He said, people who were nothing like him liked him. Think about that. People who are nothing like Jesus liked him. And Jesus liked people who are nothing like him. Jesus invited unbelieving, misbehaving, troublemaking men and women. By the way, I hope we have a lot of those show up on Easter. Unbelieving, misbehaving, troublemaking men and women that are here on Easter so they can hear the good news about Jesus. But he says men and women to follow him and to embrace something new, and they accepted Jesus' invitation. So the chief priest, get ready to wrap up before we take communion. The chief priests have a huge predicament, and if they're not careful, it's going to get away from them rather quickly. They have to somehow get the crowds who love Jesus to hate Jesus. And they got to somehow get Roman Pilate to crucify him. So they have to generate two charges. Before Pilate, they have to somehow convince Pilate that Jesus has committed treason against Rome, and the penalty for that would be execution, crucifixion. But on the other side of that equation, they have to somehow, before the crowds, convince them that Jesus had committed blasphemy, which he had not, in order that he would experience death. So shortly before Jesus stands before Pilate, he first stands before the Sanhedrin at night. Man, think about everything that Jesus has been through. All night, no sleep, trial all night. An illegal trial, by the way, because that's the only way they could do what they were doing. I want you to look at the last couple of verses before we're done here. Check out these verses. It says, the chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. So let me wrap this up. Put a bow on it. Who is actually in charge here? Is it Pilate? Some would think, because this dude's got a lot of power. Is Pilate really in charge? Is it the chief priest? I mean, they carried a lot of sway and among this august religious body that hated the Romans but also hated Jesus. Was it the chief priests that were in charge? Was it the Sanhedrin? Who truly set in motion this horrible crucifixion of an innocent man? Timothy Keller, and some of you are familiar with that name, writes, on the cross, Jesus, think about this, it is true, Jesus suffered a 3-hour-long death by slow suffocation and blood loss. That's how he died. He is on a cross, slow suffocation. There's a whole medical way, and we don't have time to get into that, and blood loss. And he died on the cross. It is Friday. So who's in charge? Is it Pilate? Is it the chief priest? Is it the Sanhedrin? I want to take you backwards just a little bit further than that. Not to a trial, but to a garden. The Garden of Gethsemane. And there, kneeling before his Father in prayer, Jesus makes a decision. And here is his decision. And you and I are the beneficiaries of it. He said, I will not run. I will not collaborate. I will not fight. I will die on Friday. I will die on Friday. The darkest day in history. And in that moment, what Jesus is doing, and you can't miss this, he is declaring his heart for you and for me and for every other sinful person that has ever lived. I don't know your story. I don't know if maybe you're here today and but what, you've never committed your life to Jesus. And you may be like a really, really good moral person. In fact, you may have put yourself on a moral improvement plan where you just said, you know what, I just want to be a better person. And part of being a better person, I'm going to go to church. I'm going to be a good mom. I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to be a good employee. And you just put yourself on a moral improvement plan. And I celebrate that. I applaud you for doing that. But that's not the same as giving your life to Jesus. Maybe you're a person that you were connected to church a long time ago and somehow you got hurt in church and you just lumped Jesus together with the church and you've just, over time, you've just strayed from Jesus. Maybe something has happened in your life. Maybe as a kid you grew up in church but you just walked away from Jesus. Now you're coming back and you're investigating. Here's what I want you to say. On that Friday, when Jesus bled and died, he did it for you. As that writer said, covered with his blood and covered with our sin. And what I want to encourage you to do today before we take communion is to pray and to receive Jesus. Some of you, when you pray this prayer with me, and Janelle's going to help you in a moment, she's going to pray it out loud to help you, and all of you, I'm asking you to pray it out loud, even though some of you, many of you, most of you have prayed it out loud before, but it's going to help the people around you that are praying it for the very first time. And for some of you, and I'm so excited about this, and heaven's going to celebrate this, when you pray and you receive Jesus, it's going to be a powerful. It's going to be the most defining moment in your life. For some of you, it's going to be a rededication. But I want you to stand to your feet. The band's going to come because they're going to lead us in a song in just a moment when we take communion. But just before they do, I want to ask you, I want to invite you to give your life to the one that spilled blood for you on that dreaded Friday. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, and nobody looking around. If you're saying, Jeff, I want to pray this prayer. I've never prayed. I've never received Christ before, but I want to do that today. Or you're saying, hey, at some point in the past, I grew up in church and I got away from the faith of my childhood, but I need to rededicate my life to Christ. While your heads are bowed and your eyes are closed and nobody looking around, I want you to put up your hand really quickly. Put it up real quickly. Yep. I see your, and put it right back down. Thank you for doing that. And I want all of you, everybody, to pray this prayer with me. Dear Jesus, I know I'm a sinner. And I need you in my life. Thank you for Friday. That you went to the cross for me. And that you paid off my sin with your own blood. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for forgiveness. Right now, I make a clear decision to receive you as the Savior and leader of my life. I pray that your Holy Spirit will come and dwell in me, and that you will lead me and guide me. And Jesus, I want you to know, for the rest of my life, with your help, I will follow you in Jesus' name. And everybody said, can we put our hands together and give Jesus some praise? Can we do it? Here's what's going to happen. The ushers are going to go ahead even now and start distributing the elements of communion. During this song, and this throwback song, I love it. Here's what's going to happen. I want you, we're not going to take communion at the same time, but at some point during this song, maybe you need to take a few moments. Maybe you just need to confess sin. Or maybe you want to just worship Jesus for a few moments before you take the elements of communion. Maybe what you want to do is just go back in your mind and think about that Friday and Jesus stumbling through the streets of Jerusalem, making his way to the place where he would be crucified, the place of the skull, Golgotha. And maybe you just remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for you. And then at a certain point in this song, you're about to receive that cup. In there is a wafer of bread, the juice. It represents his body and his blood. And then I want you to take it as we worship and we remember Jesus. And hey, by the way, if you just prayed to receive Christ and rededicate your life to the Lord, I encourage you to go ahead and your first act as a Christian, new Christian, take communion with us. And then after the song and after you've taken communion, Janelle will dismiss us. I love you, everybody.
Can make me whole. Sing this out. By his stripes we are healed. By his nail-pierced hands we're free. By his blood and we're washed clean. Now we have the victory. Come on, sing it out, say. The power of sin is broken. Jesus overcame it all. And he has won our freedom. Say, he has won our freedom. Jesus has won it all. Come on, if you know it, let's shout it out all together. We say, and hallelujah. You have won the victory. Oh, hallelujah. And you have won it all for me. Death could not hold you down. 'Cause you are the risen King. Seated in majesty. Oh, you are the risen King. So death could not hold you down. You are the risen King. Oh, you're seated in majesty. You are the risen. Oh, sing and say, our God is risen. He is alive. We won the victory. He reigns on high. Say, our God is risen. He is alive. We won the victory. He reigns on high. Come on, let's sing it out. Our God is risen. He is alive. He won the victory. He reigns on high. Our God is risen. He is alive. He won the victory. He reigns on high. Sing Amen, amen. Thank you so much for worshiping with us. Make sure you join us next week Sunday.